Shri Vasudevanand Saraswati, Chapter 9, Shri Yoganand Saraswati and Shri Ranga Avadhoot. Yoganand Saraswati. The arrival of Vasudevanand Saraswati on the stage of Gujarat had indeed been like a revolution in the spiritual and religious climate of the region. Gujarat, like other parts of India, has also given many a saint and holy souls to this land, no doubt. But the Upasana of Lord Dattatreya, bringing in its train the devout disposition of Jnana and Tapasya to self-knowledge and spiritual discipline, was perhaps like a fresh breeze coming across the Mahalaya mounts of the south, where our saint was born and whence he had appeared on the soil of Gujarat. Many a soul in Gujarat have been spiritually refreshed since then by the current of this holy breeze. Yoganand Saraswati and Shri Avadhoot are the foremost among them and merit our homage in the flow of this narration. Vasudevanand brought the torch of shining light of Adhyatma and Upasana to Gujarat, and these two have really been his torch bearers lighting the path of devotion and faith for the seekers of God. Let us first bow in reverence to Shri Yoganand and meditate on his life. It seems to be an interesting freak of destiny that Saint Vasudevanand and his disciple Yoganand should interchange the geographical areas of life's missions as if in a perfect mystic understanding. For Shri Yoganand hailed from South Gujarat, but his reputation and mission found their home in the south of India, in the region hallowed by the waters of Godavari. He belonged to the Anavil community of the southern Gujaratis and was born in a middle class family which had settled for years in a village called Talangpur near Surat in Gujarat. His real personal name was Kalyanji, but strangely enough he was fondly called as Ganda, which means mad in Gujarati. How suggestive this name proved to be of his future life. Kalyanji was indeed mad in the worldly sense, as all the mystics usually are considered to be. But the world fails to see the spiritual wisdom contained by the divine madness. The mystic, who sees God face to face and knows him, acts like a lunatic in the eyes of the world. On attaining to spiritual heights, he continued to be referred as Ganda Maharaj by the community as if by a way of correction of the initial mistake in calling him mad. His birthday also was a happy coincidence in his life. He was born on full moon day of the month of Marga Shirsha, according to the Hindu calendar, which has marked Datta Jayanti, or the sacred day of the incarnation of Lord Dattatreya. Ganda completed gradually the different stages in life like any other common man from childhood onwards through boyhood to youth. He had completed his formal education in the high school stage and accepted jobs after the manner of all educated middle class young boys of those old days. An earning member, he became eligible for marriage according to the social standards and got married. He was thus set on his path of worldly life of a householder, but soon he came at crossroads where he was destined to choose once for all his life's missions for which he was born. Destiny always intervenes and diverts the steps of man at the crossroads where he arrives in the journey of life. External circumstances and inner urges of heart also play their part, and the final decision is taken by man in the direction of his goal. Ganda, who was expected by his relatives to live a normal life of a householder, managing the farms of his father or helping him through his earnings at various clerical jobs, disappointed all the members of the household, including his wife, and chose the venture some and lonely course of renunciation in search of the reality beyond the wheel of cosmic existence, of that source of eternal peace and joy which has always weaned by the born mystics to itself from the ephemeral glamour of life. The ancient Shrutis have endorsed such a mode of renunciation in man in the well known words: one can renounce the world without a second's hesitation when one is seized by the mood of deep detachment to life. Ganda, thus in conformity with this ancient sanction, was out on the path of discovery of the truth and of the spiritual guide who might lead him there. Like all the seekers the world over, he practiced hard austerities in lonely places. By chance, he once met a saintly person by name Pandurang Swami, to whom he revealed his inner spiritual travels and prayed for guidance. Pandurang Swami, who could grasp his mood instinctively, suggested to him the name of Vasudevanand, the aroma of whose mystic personality had spread far and wide by now among the assemblies of the holy souls in all parts of the country. Luckily for Ganda Maharaj, Vasudevanand had camped at Shinur on the bank of Narmada, not very far from the spot where he was staying and doing penance. Ganda Maharaj approached the saint, who could easily fathom his faith, and welcomed him with a customary reception. Life of Ganda Maharaj up to this moment was far from a smooth sailing. It was one long series of sufferings of spirit. He was a failure judged by the earthly standards of success, and this was at the bottom of other miscalculations about him by his kith and kin. They took his religious moods to be a mere fad, a whim, and a caprice, and tried to cure him of it in their worldly ways. They could not fathom the depths of his spirit and misjudged his efforts for self redemption in life. Ultimately, his will triumphed over them, and they yielded by letting him have his way. When Ganda Maharaj came to Shinno to meet our saint, the encounter was not going to put an immediate end to his inner tortures of soul. For the Guru also to whom he had come was going to test him thoroughly before accepting him as a genuine disciple and investing his confidence in him. He asked Ganda Maharaj to return home and serve his aged parents and try to harmonize himself with the home responsibilities without giving up the spiritual discipline and the religious practices. Before sending him home back, he was assured by the master of sending him calls to meet him at different places in Gujarat. Ganda Maharaj obeyed the instructions of the master and stood the tests with success. He was finally acknowledged by the master as his never-failing disciple. The life story of Ganda Maharaj also is as varied and instructive to the religious seekers as the story of his guru, Shri Vasudevanand. It is necessary to check the temptation of elaborating this holy life in view of the length of the main narration on hand, and also of the fact that his disciples have done justice to it and have obliged the devotees in Gujarat and Maharashtra by recording the details of his saintly life through biographies in Gujarati and Marathi, thanks to his biographers. The great point made clear to those who have the power to grasp it through the story of Yoganand, that is Ganda Maharaj, is that erudition or intelligence is by no means a necessity for self-realization or for the life in God. It comes to those who become the recipients of His grace through their piety and faith, which are to their credit as is believed through the deeds of the past and the efforts of the present. Ganda Maharaj had a child's faith in his Gurudev. He believed in the divine powers of his master, and his belief and faith were happily confirmed by our saint through the occasional manifestations of his Leela or the miracles. Let us note an episode to illustrate the point. There lived a devoted soul by name Vaijnath who was introduced to Vasudevanand by Ganda Maharaj one day. This Vaijnath was a queer type of a devotee. He had collected just 8 rupees during the span of 15 years or so by adding a paisa daily to his savings. When Ganda Maharaj came to know of it, He wondered why Vaijnath, who was a perfect detached soul, cared to keep the savings with him and how long he would let the paltry amount lie unused. Vaijnath once explained the purpose of it by saying that he was collecting the money to meet the expenses of his journey to his brother's residence sometime in future. Ganda Maharaj, who was not convinced of this, conveyed this to his master with the comment that Vaijnath had been offering this explanation for the last many years and had not thought of using even a pie of it for holding a puja of the Lord. Our saint explained to Ganda Maharaj the meaning of Vaijnath's words and said that the amount was meant to be spent for the last rites of his journey of life when he would start on the way to meet the kindred divine spirit. But Ganda insisted on using the 8 rupees for the Mahapuja, the great ceremony of prayers and worship. When Vaijnath knew of it, he said it was ridiculous to think of planning a Mahapuja, the large-scale ceremony, with the paltry assets of 8 rupees. Now our saint was in a mood to get the wishes of Ganda Maharaj realized by holding the puja anyhow. He called Ganda Maharaj and Vaijnath together, took the 8 rupees from them and significantly returned one to Vaijnath. He asked Ganda Maharaj to go on with the preparations of the puja. Things were arranged and purchases were made. Invitations, as usual, were extended for prasad dinner to all the devotees. Nearly 3,000 people gathered. The prasad was served to them all. They were fed to their heart's content and something was left over. Thus Gurudev had worked upon the faith of Vaijnath and showed his powers by which he could help his devotees out of their difficulties. Shri Avadhoot records with devotional feelings the episode in his Namasudha. Salutations to thee, O Vasudev! Thou couldst feed 3,000 mouths with provisions brought merely with 8 rupees, guising Vaijnath as the host on the occasion. This incident reminds us of a similar event in the life of Jesus Christ when he fed 3,000 just with 3 loaves of bread. Rightly has Shri Avadhoot observed in his Datta Bhavani Stotra, the bag of alms of Lord Dattatreya is eternally filled and is never empty. Vasudevanand, who was now happy with the spiritual progress and implicit faith and obedience of Ganda Maharaj, commanded him to go to south for his further attainments on the path chosen by him. Ganda Maharaj undertook the pilgrimage in the south. He entered the formal stage of sannyas by donning the holy name of Yoganand Saraswati, by which he is now known to the people of Gujarat and Maharashtra. He carried on his master's mission in the south around the banks of Godavari, which is called Dakshina Ganga or the Ganga of the south, and finally settled at Gunja, a holy spot on the bank of the river, making it a place for his eternal rest and union with the Supreme Being. Gunj in the south may be called as the counterpart of Gurudeshwar in Gujarat. Both Gunj and Gurudeshwar together glorify the sacred missions of the pair of Guru and the Shishya and stand witness to this day to their great work of keeping the religious faith and the Datta Upasana fresh and living in these parts of our country. Ganagapur, Gunj and Gurudeshwar are the 3 great gates, as it were, to the godly realms of the Guru Upasana or the worship of the eternal teacher of the world. The story of Yoganand cannot be complete without reference to the life and work of Shri Avadhoot in this chapter. Both Yoganand and Avadhoot have been the sparks of the same divine fire in the form of Vasudevanand, who himself was the very incarnation of that eternal divine flame of knowledge, life, and bliss in the form of Lord Dattatreya. Shri Avadhoot. The life and work of Shri Avadhoot have been so close to us in the course of this century that space and words would fall too short for the faithful and detailed narration about him in this chapter. Thousands there are who have seen him from near, who have received his blessings, who have won his confidences to be allowed to have a glimpse into his inner mystic life and to win the priceless pearl of peace from the sea of life. Saints, as we generally believe, are the human incarnations of divinity on earth. But many a time we find their divinity initially hidden by the commonplace situations in life or common human traits. They are never suspected at their birth of possessing any promise of extraordinary spiritual achievements. Time, however, is a great stage director who brings out the latent merits of his human associates on the stage of the world and surprises the generality of mankind, which is a mere onlooker in the drama with their mysterious and awe-inspiring performances on the stage of life. But for this play, time has its own scheme and schedule, which are revealed only through the passage of the scenes in life. The saints are in their childhood sometimes undistinguished from the common stock of humanity. The common man is blind to the inner force within and is not aware of the spirituality and the potentiality concealed by the external worldly conduct of the growing saint. The difference, however, between the soul destined to lead the ordinary life of commonplace joys and sorrows, successes and failures, and the saintly soul born to lead the community is that the latter seizes the critical moments to his advantage in his life when he experiences deep urges within, the inner promptings, to leave the dull and drab track of life in favor of the goals for which he is born and to which his steps are directed by the unseen reality. The common man indulges in worldly experiences and does not think of the joy of the great beyond. Shri Avadhoot was born in a Maharashtrian family settled in Godhra in the north of Gujarat. His parents were Vittal Pant and Rukmini Bai. It is an interesting coincidence that the parents of Avadhoot should bear the same names as those of the parents of the saint Jnaneshwar of Maharashtra. The saint of Maharashtra, who has composed a number of sweet devotional bhajans or abhangas, has skillfully immortalized the memory of his parents in the last lines of his abhangas, in which he remembers his Ishtadev, the Lord Vittal, also through a subtle pun on the name of his parents. Bapa Rukmini Devi Varu Vittalu, which means both the Lord Vittal and his parents too. Avadhoot was named Pandurang and his brother's name was Narayan. Pandurang lost his father when he was only 5 years old and his mother was a support to her 2 children. Like all normal children, Pandurang had his schooling, but his scholarly disposition and intellectual caliber was detected by his teachers in his student career. He was a nationalist at heart and was drawn to Gandhiji because of his saintly qualities, which were never soiled even in the dusty climate of politics to which he was avowed for the freedom of India. Pandurang joined the Gujarat Vidyapeeth at Ahmedabad, which was founded by Gandhiji with the single purpose of encouraging national education and affirmation of the ancient values of this land. He graduated from Vidyapeeth and got himself interested in writing articles and books. He proved the flourish of his pen, his deep learning and the facility of expression through his occasional writings in those days. He even tried his hand at journalism with remarkable success. All these literary activities were, however, going to be a passing phase, just temporary sparklings on the surface, since the inner deep was sounding unconsciously within the waves of higher sentiments which were to come to the fore in future. There was a hint even in his childhood that he was born with a destiny different from the common rut of mankind. A small incident superficially was indeed very prophetic about his future. When Pandurang was a young boy of average understanding, he accompanied his parents to Narsimvadi in Maharashtra, mention of which has already been made in this book as a holy place hallowed by the association with the Saint Narsimha Saraswati, the incarnation of Lord Dattatreya. When they went there, Vasudevanand also had camped at the Wadi. Pandurang was introduced by his parents to the saint for his blessings. Shri Vasudevanand looked at him gently and received him, saying, "Oh well, this boy belongs to us." How meaningful and prophetic were those words of the saint has been proved by the life of Rang Avadhoot, which is a fresh story in the minds of us all who had the good fortune to be his contemporaries in this age. Pandurang really belonged to them, to Saint Vasudevanand, and to the Lord Dattatreya. After his graduation from the Vidyapith, when he was expected by his mother, like all mothers the world over, to follow the normal course of the householder, he announced his intentions to her that he would not like to be fettered by the chains of the household and would prefer to be free to pursue his own heart's directive, to tread the unusual path of upasana and tapasya, the path of knowledge and faith. Pandurang, who was aware of the helplessness of his mother and of her motherly ambitions about him, assured her that his brother Narayan would look after her and he himself would always pray for her blessings throughout his life. He was sure, he told her, that Dattatreya would see to her welfare and to his own also. Thus, young Pandurang broke himself away from the bonds of worldly aspirations and earthly entanglements at the age of 40 and around and straight came to the banks of Narmada at Nareshwar. The banks of Narmada have been hallowed by the treks of many a mystic soul, of the saints and sages in the hoary past in this land. Though the rivers like the Ganga and the Yamuna have been witnesses to the life and work of divine personalities since the days of Ramayana and Mahabharata, the river Narmada has an extraordinary sacredness to her credit. The sages describe Narmada as Ubhayatata Pavani, that is, the river with both the banks equally sacred, and hence the parikrama or the trek on foot around this river is said to be full of special spiritual significance to ascetics aspiring for success in self-realization. Naturally, therefore, Rangavadut elected to stay on the bank of Narmada, which was also the divine motherly river who had nourished spiritually his two beacon stars, namely Vasudevanand and Yoganand Saraswati. While he stayed on the bank of Narmada, he had the inner urge to undertake the pradakshina round the river as a preliminary step to his tapasya. He would have soon started on it too. He thought of going to Gurudeshwar to pray to his master Vasudevanand by waiting devotionally before his samadhi, the holy memorial, and to beg of his leave to undertake the pilgrimage. He sat in prayerful meditation and heard a voice within speaking in unmistakable tones. "Ganda or Yoganand is waiting for you. First see him." Pandurang gave up the idea of the parikrama for the time being and wondered where he could trace the whereabouts of Ganda and how he could meet the person to whom Gurudev had so mystically referred. To his great relief, he secured the address of Ganda, who was then living at Gunj on the banks of Godavari in Maharashtra. Pandurang went to Gunj and contacted Ganda Maharaj. He asked Pandurang to go through his composition Guru Murti Charitram and to revise the work written by him in Marathi. Pandurang took it to be a command of meaningful grace bestowed on him by Yoganand and worked in that direction. He could complete it according to the wish of his Guru and resume the plan of Pradakshina, the pilgrimage on foot round the Narmada. He started on his holy march with faith at heart and stood all the hazards that started him in the face. With his spiritual strength and courage, which were the outcome, he knew of his Guru's blessings and his faith in Lord Dattatreya. The Pradakshina was duly over and he returned to Nareshwar, which was henceforth destined to be the spot and the center of his holy mission, which is a story too well known to be reproduced in details. Since his return to Nareshwar at the end of his pilgrimage, he came to be known by the familiar name of Rang Avadhoot, which retains the part of his personal name, Pandurang, and adds Avadhoot, which is characteristic of his later mystic attainments witnessed by so many of his devotees during his existence. He brought his life to a close in a truly mystic manner only a year ago on the Kartik Amavasya, befitting the way of divine saints who give up their bodies at their own will through yoga or the power of penance. Kalidas, the Sanskrit poet, beautifully sums up the general course of life of the princes of Raghu's dynasty in his famous work Raghu Vamsha, where he tells us that there were the royal sages who brought this earthly existence to an end in a spiritual manner. The poet describes the lives of those princes who studied in their boyhood, attended to worldly occupations in their youth, but took to ascetic ways in old age and finally emancipated themselves from physical bonds through spiritual power. Thus, Rangavadut also gave up his body unexpectedly without even a warning to his devotees at Haridwar in the presence of the holy heights of the Himalayas. His soul departed from the earthly habitation into the union with the Supreme on the sacred banks of the Ganga. Though physically unseen, there are millions who see him within themselves through their constant recitations of his compositions, among which the two outstanding to name are Shri Guru Leelamrit and Datta Bhavani. The former work of his magnum opus with three parts named Jnana, Karma and Upasana. He covers a wide range of philosophy, religion and faith in this great book with a ring of metaphysical note coupled with devotional melody. The work is a literary masterpiece in Gujarati poetry. The latter, Datta Bhavani, has 52 stanzas of couplets, as suggested by the title, glorifying the beauty of the divine grace of Dattatreya through his incarnations on the earth, and the small devotional composition is a constant companion to his devotees in their hearts. It has a musical quality and sung tunefully by the Bhaktas daily in their life. Guru Leelamrut and Datta Bhavani are his literary image, as it were, even as the Gita is said to be the speech form of Lord Krishna by Saint Jnaneshwar. Notwithstanding the fact that this has been perhaps too long a digression in the main course of our thesis, namely the life of Shri Vasudevanand Saraswati, it could not but form the natural part of the story, since these two saints, Yoganand and Rangavadut, have been, as said above, his torch bearers, or like the two identical lamps lighted at the common flame on the soil of Gujarat. How mysterious indeed is the event that Yoganand was appointed to be his spiritual heir in Maharashtra and Rangavadut was entrusted to carry on the mission in Gujarat. Indeed, the ways of the great souls are inscrutable. In the realm of spirit, there are no barriers of geography, nor are there any bounds of caste and race. Saints belong to the universe a whole. Jai Thembe Swami.